What am I going to talk to you guys about today? I am going to talk about the why of being plant-based. Now, I am honored to say that it is an honor and a privilege to follow Brenda Davis because she does some of the most incredible, amazing, complete, and accessible lectures on the value and benefits of being plant-based for our health. And over the course of these 10 days, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to talk to you about how being plant-based is better for you health-wise, how it's better for the environment, but that still leaves the question of why. Why is it that being plant-based is better for us? Because I'm sure that you, like me, when you were in school, you were taught that human beings are omnivores, meaning that we are supposed to be eating a mixture of animal and plant foods. And if that's true, then why is it that eliminating part of what we're supposed to be eating is better for us? Well, it's because, like Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca, we've been misinformed. We are not omnivores. We are, by design and physiology and even our psychology, strict plant eaters, and that's what I hope to prove to you today. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and I'll start you off with a quote of mine. People have been so thoroughly brainwashed that they actually think eating pieces of dead, rotting corpses is somehow healthy. It's just crazy. It's a corpse, ladies and gentlemen. It may not be in a casket, but it's a corpse. So, again, title of the talk, Are Humans Designed to Eat Meat? I started all my lectures off with a quote from God's Word. This is from the book of Genesis. He says, "You shall eat the plants of the field." So, why is this topic important? It's important because experts estimate that up to 80% of the major disease and premature death that we see in Western countries every year could be prevented by making major changes in our diet and lifestyle. And again, just think about that for a moment, 80%. If I were to ask for a show of hands, which I really can't see because the lights are in my eyes, but if I were to ask you to raise your hands if you know of someone who's had a heart attack or had cancer or has diabetes or who has died from these diseases, I'm willing to bet every single hand in this room would go up. And I'm sure many of you, like me, have lost loved ones before their time to these dreadful diseases. Well, if you think that 80% of those people or 80% of the suffering that they've endured could have been avoided, that is just a really sobering statistic. And so we need to understand that, yes, being plant-based will help us avoid these things, but we also need to understand why. Carnivores have very different milks from the herbivores. The carnivores typically have a lot more fat and a lot more protein in their milk than the two herbivorous species at the bottom. And that's because, again, their babies have to finish developing outside the womb. They're growing much faster, so they need a lot more energy in the form of fat, and they need a lot more protein. But let's just look at the two herbivores, if you will. You see that in the first column, the total solids are pretty much the same. Cows, 12.3, humans, 12.0. Look at the percentage of fat. Is it the same or different? And remember, I'm going to start pointing. It's the same. Does anybody disagree with that? All right. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. What about the amount of protein? Big difference. And if you can read, I've already given you the answers. There's a lot more protein in the cow's milk. So let me ask you, why is that? Again, I hear mumbling, but I want some answers. Because, okay, the calf Calf is bigger, but it has to grow faster. Exactly. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, proteins are building blocks. And you only need a lot of protein if you're growing very fast. What is the slowest growing species on the planet? Huh? Well, earthworm. No, that ain't it. What is the slowest growing species on the planet? Huh? Someone says a sloth. No, sloths only take about 1.5 years, 2 years to reach maturity. Humans! Humans take 20 years to reach maturity. 18 to 20 years. And that's why we have the lowest protein content of any mammal on the planet in our milk. But what's important for you guys to know is that the type of protein in cow's milk and human milk is very different. The protein in cow's milk is much more growth stimulatory, and that's not a good thing because it means that kids raised on cow's milk are much more prone to develop cancer and heart disease and other metabolic problems as they age. Now, let me come back to that fat content. We said it's the same, but is it the same kind of fat? Can you churn butter from human milk? No, you can't. Can you make ice cream from human milk? No, you can't. If you have seen human breast milk, it is thin and translucent, whereas cow's milk is white and opaque. That's because the fat in cow's milk is highly saturated. That's why you can churn butter out of it and make ice cream. So again, even though they may superficially look similar, they're very different. Now, let's look at that last column, lactose. Lactose is the sugar that's in milk. Who has more lactose? Humans. Well, if the baby cow is growing faster and if the baby cow is bigger, why does the human have more lactose? To feed the brain, exactly. Because proportionately, the human baby's brain is much bigger than a baby cow's brain. And that means if you raise your baby or your grandchildren on cow's milk, you are starving their brains. There's not enough sugar in it because the brain only uses sugar for its metabolism. You see, God, nature, whoever you want to attribute this to, knew what they were doing when they designed these milks. They designed them for the species. And again, so as I said, the huge capacity is necessary because hunting is so inefficient. Stomach that can hold 30% of an animal's body weight means a 50 kilogram wolf can eat up to 34 pounds of meat at a sitting. A 300-pound lioness can eat 100 pounds of meat at a sitting. And so for this 50 kilogram wolf, or dog, if you will, they can consume 21,000 calories at a single meal. We can't even come close to that. And that's enough energy, again, to recover what they wasted and still last them until they can catch something else. Their small intestine actually is very short because once the meat is liquefied in the stomach, the protein and fat is very easily absorbed, and so they don't need a lot of surface area. And then it's passed on to the large intestine, whatever residue is left over, so they can quickly get it out of the body. And so this is some pictures of carnivore digestive tracts. And essentially what you see, big stomach, short small intestine, short, straight, large intestine. All right. Well, plants are different, right? Because plants don't have bones. As a result, they have to use insoluble fibers to stiffen and protect their tissues. As a result, in addition to a cell wall, every plant has, in addition to a cell membrane, every plant cell has a cell wall made up of cellulose, which is fiber. Well, what's the issue with cellulose? The issue with cellulose is that no mammal makes enzymes that digest cellulose. Okay? We don't make enzymes that digest cellulose. Are there any creatures that do make enzymes that digest cellulose? Bacteria, exactly. Well, okay, yeah, we're kind of back to the termites. Yeah. And this brings up the fact that there are two main ways of dealing with plant foods, depending on what kind of plant foods you eat. Those animals like the ruminants, like cows, antelope, that eat mainly grass, hay, high cellulose containing foods, they are the ones that have the four stomachs. Why? Because in that first stomach is a soup made up of bacteria and protozoa that release cellulose digesting enzymes. That's why what will happen is the cow goes out in the morning and she just scoops up a bunch of grass, swallows it, lets it soak up those enzymes, then she brings it back up and does what with it? Chews it. Because chewing is designed to break apart the plant material, mix it with the enzymes to allow that process of digestion to begin. Then when she swallows it, it goes into a different stomach and the process proceeds apace. Animals like horses and other herbivores that eat high energy plant foods like grains and root vegetables and fruits, it would be inefficient for them to have a four stomach type of digestive system because the bacteria would use up all of that energy in an apple or in some corn. So instead, they have a simple stomach, liquefy the meal, send it through their small intestine, extract the readily available nutrients, and they send the leftover fiber into the colon where bacteria or the microbiome in the colon then starts to break down that fiber and they extract additional nutrients from it. And you can tell the difference between the two digestive schemes by looking at what comes out. The four stomach fermenters have a very efficient process and they produce a liquid stool. And if you've ever seen a fresh cow patty, you know exactly what I mean. Whereas the hindgut fermenters, like the horses, produce a much more solid stool that has a lot of undigested fiber in it. So we're just going to focus on the herbivores with simple stomachs since we only have a simple stomach. It holds less than 30% of the total gut capacity. And herbivores on average eat about 3.3% of their body weight over the course of the day. But they have to eat multiple times to even achieve that. It is only mild to moderately acidic when it's full with food. The pH is around 4.5 to 5. It's designed for batch feeding. So we saw in the carnivores, they're designed for intermittent feeding. They'll eat today, won't eat for a week or more. The herbivores all have to eat multiple meals every single day in order to remain alive. They cannot hold enough calories at a single meal to last them a single day. And again, they have to eat several times every day. Their small intestine, on the other hand, is much, much longer than that of the carnivores. The herbivore small intestine is 10 to 12 times body length, and that's because fiber slows down the extraction of these nutrients, so they need a lot more surface area. And it has an adjustable mix of carbohydrate, fat, and protein-digesting enzymes, unlimited capacity to absorb carbohydrate. Here's some examples. And so you see rabbit, dik-dik, which is an antelope, has multiple stomachs, and then the zebra. But notice at both ends that the colon has this sacculated, pouched appearance, and in the rabbit you also see the presence of an appendix. And then just quickly looking at the lower digestive tract, carnivore colon, again, straight, smooth, because whatever residue reaches this point, there's no more nutrition to be gained. It can only start to putrefy and rot inside the body. So they want to get it out of their body as quickly as possible. And so they don't need a large storage capacity. Contrast that with the plant eaters. Because fiber can be broken down by bacteria into a lot of bioactive and energy-containing compounds, they have this sacculated structure to their colon which increases its capacity. It's much longer and does a lot of things such as vitamin production, creating short-chain fatty acids, which change physiology. It enhances the activity of a variety of plant compounds and water absorption. All right, now let's move on to humans. Well, the main thing that we need to understand is that humans have the palate preferences and, importantly, psychology of an herbivore. We naturally love and crave the taste, textures, colors, and variety of plant foods. So we are not only herbivores by our anatomy and physiology, but also our psychology. Because in order to survive in nature, you not only have to be able to procure whatever food you're supposed to eat, but you also have to be attracted to it. And that's why we are attracted to bright colors. We are attracted to smooth, rounded shapes. We're attracted to things that are firm and things that taste like plants. Now, this is a Far Side cartoon. It says, Rusty makes his move. Notice he's got a can of dog breath. Well, we see that carnivores will often, when they find a dead, rotting carcass, they will go roll in it and then go back to their pack mates. Why do they do that? Because they are showing their pack mates, hey, I know where food is. If you want to have something to eat, you need to hang out with me. So the question is, if we're natural flesh eaters, why don't we arrive at our date's door wearing scraps of meat and smelling like rotten flesh rather than flowers and fruit? You know, why don't we make our perfumes and colognes to say, instead of, Chanel No. 5, we could call it like Slaughterhouse No. 4 or Rotting Carcass, No. 6. It's because our brain is telling us what it wants. It wants the plant compounds. That's why we like to smell like plant compounds. Furthermore, we are so in love and so in need of plants that we create all of these artificial products to make our homes actually smell like plants. And that's because human beings developed as a species dependent on flowering plants. That is why flowering plants are so important to us, because we are a plant and fruit eating species. And our brain knows that if we are ingesting plants, if we are around plants, we will be healthier and live longer. And guess what? That's exactly what science is telling us. But it actually gets even more interesting than that. Because in order to make animal tissue acceptable, we have to disguise it to play tricks on our mind, because we don't like it in its natural form. So we try to make it look like plants. Look at that. You got a pear and a lamb chop, apples and meatballs, bananas and sausages, celery and bacon, a squash and a drumstick. We have to change the way animal tissue looks to make it acceptable, but not just the way it looks, but also the way it tastes and smells. So even things like sushi, we chop it so that it looks like raw fruit. We are doing this so that we will not react with a disgust response. By the way, these slides are taken from a lecture called Meat Eating and Mind Games. You can find it on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, type in Dr. Milton Mills, Meat Eating and Mind Games, and the lecture will come up. The first slide about our love of flowering plants comes from a lecture of mine called Flowers in the Human Intellect, how plants helped us develop as a species. That lecture is not online. Finally, elimination. Turns out food spends more time in your colon than it does anywhere else. So how do I know that? Well, let me ask you, how long does a meal spend inside your body? 2 hours? Who said 2 hours? No, then that would have meant that everybody in here would have been running out to poop already. No. Well, I once had someone ask me, Dr. Mills, how do I know how long a meal stays in my body? Everything that comes out looks alike, right? So I told him, I said, this is what you do. Next time you eat whole kernel corn, look at your watch when you eat it, and then look at the time when you see it again. If you're eating a good high-fiber diet, it will average about 14 to 16 hours. So let's say 16 hours. So how long does food stay in the stomach? About 2 hours. How long does it take for a meal to pass through the 30 to 35 feet of the small intestine? Actually, less than 2 hours. So we've only accounted for 4 hours max. So that means the rest of that 10 to 12 hours, it's in your colon. And what's it doing there? Hanging out like relatives that won't go home? No, it's being acted on by the microbiome to create these short-chain fatty acids and other compounds that improve your health. That's if you're eating the right foods and you have the right microbiome. So one of the things that they can do is they activate these phytoestrogens and plant compounds called lignans. And breast cancer risk was decreased by 22% in women with the highest lignin intake. Whole grain rye decreased PSA in men with prostate cancer by 14%. Consumption of soy phytoestrogen reduces both breast cancer and prostate cancer risk in a dose-dependent fashion, meaning the more you eat, the lower the risk. Metabolism of phytoestrogens by these bacterial strains makes them more bioavailable. And bacterial strains that are most effective are those associated with plant-based diets. And this is an example of what happens when you eat the right foods. So what you see here is that when you're eating a high-fiber diet, you have this really thick layer of mucus that has kind of this two phases to it. In the upper layer, you have your bacteria, which are breaking down the fiber. Most importantly, they're creating this short-chain fatty acid that has 4 carbons called butyrate. Why is butyrate important? It's because colonic cells prefer to use butyrate as their energy source as opposed to extracting nutrition from the bloodstream. So when there's plenty of butyrate present, you see that there are nice tight junctions here. The colon cells look very healthy and very happy. You don't get leakage of colon contents into your bloodstream. All right? And I'm kind of rushing because I'm about to run out of time. And also, this mucus layer has antibiotic properties in it that kill off bad guys and only let the good guys survive. But what happens if you're not eating enough fiber? Well, you see that, number one, you don't have a thick layer of mucus. And because you're not creating that butyrate, these colon cells are sickly. They can't maintain tight junctions. You start to get slippage of bacteria and bacterial antigens in between the colon cells, and that, my friends, is leaky gut syndrome. And you guys will be able to read all this information when you get the information from the organizers. It's all there. And studies have shown that leaky gut correlates with a higher risk for depression because lipopolysaccharide is a bacterial antigen that is higher. People who have major depression have higher levels of antibodies against lipoprotein polysaccharide, meaning that it shows that they are suffering from this leaky gut mechanism. Whereas when people go onto plant-based diets, their colons tend to heal themselves, that process reverses, and they're much less prone to having depression. Well, what about dementia? Does diet have anything to do with dementia? Well, this is showing you how much meat people eat around the world. The darker the country, the more meat. Why is that important? It's because when you look at Alzheimer's disease, what you see is that the more meat a country eats, the higher the incidence and rate of Alzheimer's. The more plant-based a country's diet, the lower their risk of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, okay? So places like Iceland, the US, Denmark, eating a lot of meat and dairy, very high rates of Alzheimer's. Places where people eat a more plant-based diet, very low rates of Alzheimer's and other dementias. And we now know that our gut is directly connected to our brain, that the bacteria in the gut make neurotransmitters that actually travel to the central nervous system, help your brain function more smoothly, lowers the risk for depression, anxiety, and other disorders. Let me kind of power through these slides and I'll come back to you. And then just in general, again, inflammation, the higher the levels of inflammation, the greater the risk for ultimately developing dementia. TNF is tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is a sign of inflammation. And again, the higher the level, the greater the risk of dementia. So just to touch on some issues of physiology, do carnivores worry about fat and cholesterol? No, they don't. Dogs will not develop heart disease. Dogs and other carnivores, no matter how much fat and cholesterol you feed them, because they can dispose of it without forming blockages in their arteries. They don't develop gallstones. One of the reasons bear bile is prized in Chinese medicine is because when you drink bear bile, the body will take that bile and store it in our gallbladder, and bear bile is so strong it actually dissolves human cholesterol gallstones. But we also have medicines that do that now, so we don't have to go around killing bears. Carnivores can detoxify preformed vitamin A, and they manufacture their own vitamin C, whereas we cannot because we are plant dependent. They make urine that's up to 2.5 times more concentrated than ours, and they can metabolize excess animal protein without destroying their bones. Only herbivores have carbohydrate-digesting enzymes in their saliva. Only herbivores have an appendix. It's part of the gastrointestinal immune system. We cannot detoxify preformed vitamin A, but we can detoxify a wide range of plant alkaloids. We can make vitamin A from beta-carotene, but we have to have vitamin C, and we can't eat putrefying flesh, and we can ferment fibers. So, in closing, we have abdicated responsibility for our health and that of our children by allowing profit-driven marketing campaigns to dictate how we eat and feed our families. We gorge ourselves on unhealthy foods and stuff our children full of misnamed Happy Meals until they come to resemble pint-sized Michelin men. Then we throw our hands up in despair when they and we develop asthma, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, depression, and other chronic ailments. We have to remember these chronic diseases didn't fall from the sky at the behest of some malevolent God. They are the consequences of our own actions, and as such, we can change our behavior and improve our health. We were all born without preferences. Nobody asked for fried chicken, ice cream, or pork chop in the delivery room. The unhealthy things we eat, we learn to like. And just like we were taught to like unhealthy foods, we can learn to like healthier ones instead. We can change for the better. We must do this not only for our own benefit, but for the health and well-being of our children and for the planet and its other inhabitants. Wow, just in time. All right. I'll be more than happy to hang out and answer questions outside. I don't want to keep you guys from lunch. You guys have been a great audience. Thank you.